Hey everybody, this is Matt. I'm going to show you how to do the prep in AE step for the holiday videos. So first let's start off by opening up the Premiere project that this video was edited in. We're going to work on Turkish Holidays 24. So if you've done this step before, you're familiar with the way that these are laid out. We have the 1080p composition, and then all of these shots are just one after another. Follows a very predictable pattern. We've got these two graphical bumpers, which are here and here. But nothing too crazy here. So what you are going to do in this step is bring this stuff over from Premiere to After Effects, and from there on, the motion graphics person can do what they need to do. But there's quite a few things that you'll need to do in order to make that as easy as possible for them. So that's what we're going to go over. That's what this step is for. So once you have the Premiere project open, we're going to open up After Effects, and you need to open up the template for the language that you're working on. Every one of these holiday videos is working from a template, so don't ever just start up a new project. So we're going to go to AE Projects, Holidays. We're working on Turkish, and the one we're going to make is 24. You see that everything up to 24 has already been made, and it's this template that we're going to open up. So let's open that up. This just says it's locked. Don't save any changes to this file. I'm going to resize this for my window, and okay. So this, like prepping in AE, this is sometimes like the first After Effects task some people have. So I'm going to kind of talk at a very basic level. The kind of unfortunate thing about these prep in AE videos is that in a way they're way more complicated than what normal people like do in their first After Effects project. Like we're kind of enforcing this separate system on it, which is not in some ways like it's not the way that After Effects is designed to work, but we've made it work in a certain way. So just bear with me, and I think really just following the steps initially, then just finishing a project, then taking a look back, trying to figure out what the heck happened, looking at the final composition and figuring out how it got that way, that's going to be what's valuable to you. So we're going to just get started, and I'll try to explain a few things, but in most part, just try to follow my instructions, okay? So we have the main 1080 composition. This is what we'll export. This is the final project where everything else comes together. And let's just look at everything that's in here. So we've got this marketing frame, and we can look at that right here. That's this graphic, this video bumper, which appears at the beginning of all of our videos. We have this title, which is looking just like white right now because it is a blank composition except for a white solid at this moment. So that just needs to be there, but there's not anything in it. And then we see the marker shot start here. This is at 8 seconds. Coincidentally, in Premiere, this is where you were instructed to start your projects, and maybe you can start to see why. So this is where the host is going to start talking. And then everything else here, except for the bug, which should be throughout the video, you can see that it's right here, the website URL. Everything else, the timing is not set right at this point. Everything else is just starting from 8 seconds. And what you're going to be doing is making them appear at the right times. We're going to import the footage right now. So let's go back to Premiere. Just select all of this stuff. I'm hitting Command C, go back to After Effects. Now you're going to paste this in, but you're going to paste it into a very specific place, and that is host footage, which I hope makes sense. So if you hit Command V, this is what it's going to do. So you see that it has kept that 8-second gap in there for you, but you usually don't want that. So I'm going to undo that with Command Z. And this time I'm going to hit Option Command V. And now we've just started from the playhead. So you could have just dragged all of the footage left 8 seconds, but this gets you exactly what you want from the start. And I'm going to resize this so you can see all of the clips here. What it's done is imported 3 different copies. You see that we've got A, goes all the way down to J, and we got another set, A to J. So what's going on here? Well, in Premiere, we don't have just one track for each of these clips. They all have a video track and then 2 audio tracks. And that's what this is doing. That's what After Effects has done for you by importing it. It keeps all those things because there are times that you'll want it, but we don't want it in this case. So you see that these are just the video tracks, these are just audio tracks. Erase all of the audio tracks. But then since we still want audio, just turn on, see this column, it's the speaker. Turn on this column so you can click them, each one of them like this, or you can click one and drag down. But you want to end up with this, so it's just one set of clips from A to J, and all the clips have both video and audio. You also have these quiz intros and fun fact intros. You can just delete those, leave them as empty spaces. You don't want to move this back or anything, but they're really just placeholders for the time. Okay, I'm going to move back to the normal window layout. We also have these clips that are inside of our After Effects project here. And if you're not familiar with After Effects, this is all of the project assets, everything that's going to be used in our final project. So we have a good place we can put these just in this footage folder. So you can take everything and drag it in there and then close this. That just makes it look nice. Okay. So this is a good time to kind of explain how this is laid out. I'm not going to get into super big detail, but just you need to know where this host footage composition fits into the big picture of the video. So as I mentioned before, that this main 1080, this is where everything comes together. This is the final project which is exported. And if we just look at what's happened here, so now at the beginning we see the host coming through. And they're in that because she's in that host footage composition. But if you look down here, none of these compositions are the host composition, the host footage composition. These are all different ones. And so why can we see the host footage? That's because if you open up any one of these, let's look at wide shot, they're composed of other compositions, and one of which is this host footage. So we can turn that off, and she's gone. And that's the way that this is set up. This is the big thing you need to kind of think about. These compositions are all basically the same, except for the way we're looking at the host footage through it. So let me give you an example. We've got a wide shot. And when we just import the host footage and look at it through this wide shot composition, she's in a wide shot. Okay. If we look at another composition, let's go back out here, and we have this this CU. If we look at it through, let's actually look at this one. If we look at this one through this composition, this is now the CU composition. Now she's close up. And the only thing that causes that is the scale on this host footage. So in this case, we have this set to 150%. In this case, let's look at the scale here. We have this set to 110. If I made this 150, moved it down, we basically have this exact same composition of the CU. And that's the only difference. We do this because we're going to replicate the cuts that are happening in After Effects. And instead of just doing all the editing in with the host footage and having that all pass through to a single composition, now what we can do is we can kind of define the way that different shots look. And so if we're looking at the close-up composition, we're going to have it look exactly the way we want it. So that's the reason we do it. And if you don't understand right now, don't worry about it. I'm not doing you any favors by talking too much about this right now. But that's what's going on here. So your next step after you do the import is to clean up the host footage a little bit. We need it to be in a format that we can work with it. And right now it has this green screen footage, so it's taking up the whole height and width of the composition, we need to be able to just kind of loosely key this out so that we can work with it. You're not the person who's going to be doing the final key. So really this is just for so that you can see what's going on. Don't worry too much about making it look nice. You're just removing the green in a very rough way. So this is the effects panel. If you don't see it, you might need to adjust your window. You can click on this effects and presets to make sure it's there. And the effect we're looking for is called key light. You can get to it through here by finding key light. What I'll typically do is just you can type the first letters of the effect here and it will appear. So how do you apply an effect to a track? Well, it's easy. You just can drag and drop it on top of it. With this clip selected, you could also just double click on this, whatever you want to do. So the effect is now applied, and we can tell that we are in the effect controls for this layer, A1-W, A1-W, and we see that the key light effect is here. So for your purposes, there's only about three variables you need to adjust. Screen color, and here you're just going to be choosing the green. Just choose something that's like in the middle. What I mean by that is, you can see if you're just looking at this kind of as a whole, looking at this whole, we have dark areas, we have light areas. Just go for a middle area. Okay, and that does most of the work for you. You really don't need to do more than that, but we're going to go to Screen Matte, Clip Black. I'm not even going to tell you what this does because you can kind of get the idea. This is removing some of the gray there. Clip White, we're going to make it so that she's less transparent. Okay, you see we're filling in some of the gaps. And if you're interested, you can check out this Screen Matte view to kind of see what we've done here. So if we were to reset these, this is where we started with. We see gray here, we see gray here. This should be white, this should be black. And that's what we're doing here. Okay. So green screen is obviously a huge topic. There's lots to look into and lots to know, but we don't care so much. You can make this intermediate or final. It doesn't really matter because the first thing that the color corrector is going to do is just delete your effect. So you do whatever you want to do. As long as it doesn't take too much time. So this key light effect, what we now need to do is just copy it, and I'm doing Command-C after I've selected the name of it. And I'm just going to select all the other clips. I'm going to move my time indicator so I can see what it looks like. And just Command-V is going to apply that same effect to everything. As you scan through here, you should see that all of these clips now are keyed out. Okay. So that's the green screen. And if you're spending more than like a minute on this, you're really doing overkill. If you're interested in green screen stuff, we can certainly talk about that, but don't, spend a lot of time trying to make it just perfect. Okay, the next step is to line up the host. And this is something that is sometimes very confusing. They're not sure why we're doing this. And here's the reason. What I'm going to do is I'm going to just hide all of these host video layers for a second. Now we just have this stand-in graphic. That's this guide here. Let's go back out to main 1080 and look at one of these wide shots. So we want to make sure, it's really important that like the eye line is in the right place, that the host is centered up. We really want to lock down this shot and make it look the same throughout all the languages, even if the host is off center in one of the frames or she's shorter. Like we're all going to bring them up to this level so that their eyes are in the same place, the body's in the same place, it's the same size. A wide shot looks like a wide shot no matter what language, and we use this guide to help us with that. So we can see this wide shot. That's the look it should have with her eyes right there. We see in the close-up, let's go out here and go to one of the close-ups. The close-up, we should have roughly this composition with her eyes about here. So that's what we're doing here with this lining up process. We're going to take all this footage. I'm going to show this again. And we want to just make sure that she is in roughly the same place. Okay, so don't worry. Just don't overthink this. That's the big thing. Don't think, oh, if I scale it up, it's going to lose quality. Don't worry about that. Don't even worry about, in this case, with close-ups. Don't even worry about this case where, well, if I match that up, and then she's cut in half, don't worry about that either, because the template takes care of that. Okay, so what you're doing here is just you're going to line up the face and the eyes so that they're generally going to be the same as this host we have here. And just trust the template to take care of the rest. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to move these below so it's a little bit easier to work. Now I can see the guide kind of on top of the host, and I can tell what I'm doing a little bit better. And I'm just going to start lining these up. What I do is just for the first one, really stop and think and try to make it just right. People have different body types. If we just hide this, we see that she's a slightly different body type. But this is what I'm looking for here. So maybe scale this up a little bit more. All right. And if we hide this guide and then we look at this in our wide shot, it's going to look like that. In our close-up, it's going to look like that. And so this is looking okay to me. Now I'd recommend not using the guide, not using this one to help make your job easier. Now use this clip, because that's a lot easier to work off of. The way you want to do that is find a good frame where she's kind of in a neutral pose, staring straight ahead, not having her head cocked to the side, and use this button. Take a snapshot. Okay, I'm going to take a snapshot now. Got it. And what that allows me to do is when I move my cursor to someplace else, I can show this button, which is right next to the camera, and that will briefly show it to me again. All right. So that's very useful for this purpose. So what we're going to do is just move this over, take another look. All right. I'm just eyeballing this. At this point, it's like good enough. I'm going to make this a little bit larger though, just so it's pretty close. All right. So don't obsess over this. Really, it's just got to be kind of on the same area. That looks good to me. Now we're moving on to this next shot to see if we compare that. She looks like she's zoomed out a little bit more and to the right. So if I just make this a little bit larger, move her over. Let's look at this. By the way, I blew past this, but you can access all the properties by opening this up, and you can find scale. But what I was doing is if you just select it and hit the S key, you just get the scale. So if that's all you want to animate, that's a good way to keep your interface really simple. So we'll just do one kind of scan through all of this. So sure, there's a little bit of variation, but there are parts where that matters, and there are parts where they don't matter, and you'll have a chance to refine that a bit later. But in general, you're done with the host footage. So now we're back out to main 1080. And you can see this is starting to kind of come together a little bit. The problem is that all of these shots, all these compositions are being shown at the exact same time. And remember, if we look at this like a window, we only want to see one shot at one time, because otherwise we're going to be seeing them superimposed like this. And if you've noticed, all of these shots are named after, they have these letters, and that's named after the shots from the clips. What I mean by that is we have A, B, C, D, all the way to J, and each of these has a corresponding composition. So maybe you can kind of predict what we're going to do next. Next, we're going to be adjusting the in points and out points of all these compositions so that they match what is in host footage. So this is the way I would approach this. It's not even important that you see the video at this point. What's really important is that you see this timeline and this timeline. And the really easy way to do that is to select one of these, click right here, and drag down until you're highlighting this bottom area. Let go, and now you've got dual screen. You got two timelines in the same window. I'm going to make sure I'm seeing main 1080 and host footage because these are what are important. Just let me set my work area to be a little bit easier to work with. Okay. This process as well is it's just doing the same thing for every shot. This time you don't even need to make any considerations of what kind of shot it is, just as long as you know what the letters are, what the corresponding composition is, and how to set in and out points. That's all you need to do. So this is the question we're asking. What is the last frame of this first shot? And the way we get that is just by going to it. So we can zoom in, find it. Okay, so there it is. Okay, so this is, you're actually on the last frame. That's what this means. As you notice, as we move here, this timeline, this time indicator also moves with it. And that's very valuable because this is what we want to change. We want to make it so that this composition is no longer visible, or its last frame is this point in time. So there's a really nice keyboard shortcut that cuts this frame, cuts this composition, I'm sorry, so that it ends right now. And that is Alt right bracket. What's happened here, you can tell by the graying out, is that now this composition, it still like exists until the end of the video, but we're only showing it until this point. So if we zoom way in, we see that what we're seeing here is the last frame of this video and the last frame of the composition. They're the very same. If we move forward, I'm using the page down key, they move in tandem. So we'll go over this a little bit more, why we're doing this, what the implications are. But for now, just kind of follow along. So we can go down the line. The next one is this quiz introduction. And that should just fit in this gap. And if we are at the beginning, so we've gone forward one frame, we're now at the beginning of this blank space. If I hit the left bracket key, the problem was that I didn't have this timeline selected. You can tell which one's selected by the yellow border. I'm going to pretend like I meant to make that mistake to point that out. So what we want is this one to begin at this frame, left bracket, and that does that. Now let's zoom in here again. We see that we go from this composition to this composition. Well, this is actually just footage, but you get the idea. Okay. Next up is to find where this one starts. This time I'm going to use a slightly different technique. I don't want to zoom in every time. I'm just going to hold down Shift, which is going to snap to these areas where there are cuts. I'm going to hold Shift and just bring it close. And you don't even have to look, but if you want to, you can see that we're now at the beginning. And what we want, the corresponding composition to this one is this quiz question, B. It's number B, letter B. And you don't want to hit just left bracket. That moves everything up. And I'm not going to get into why, that's not what you want. What you want is to do Alt left bracket. What's key here is that we're still starting the shot. Like I said, just like this one exists at the end, this one exists at the beginning, we're just not showing it. And that helps the timing stay in sync. All right. So we can zoom in here. Yes, that's right. Now let's just go to the end of here. When we have a cut where there's two pieces of footage next to each other, it is valuable to kind of look, because this and this, it's a big difference. You want to make sure you're at the end of the shot you're working on instead of the beginning of the next one. Okay, so this one we're just going to end. Again, Option right bracket, page down to go forward a frame, and now we want this one, C. This composition needs to start on C, so we hit Option left bracket. But also look here, this is C, D, and E. So instead of ending it here at C, we actually want to go to the end of E. This whole thing is going to be one composition. All right, so there we are. At the end of this composition, here we are. All right, and make sure that this is selected and Option right bracket. All right, we have another gap here. We're going to page down to go forward a frame, and this is where that fun fact intro is going to go. So left bracket, no Alt. Okay, that begins there. Next, we're going to find this part, beginning of shot F. Option left bracket. Find the ending point. double check, make sure we've got the end of this clip, not the beginning of the next one. And then fun fact, Alt Option right bracket, go forward a frame, G, this is going to be Option left bracket, all right. So here, we're at the end here. This is where G ends. Go forward a frame. This is where H begins. Zoom right here. This is where H ends. Yes. And page down. That's where J begins. Make J begin there. And we can hold to the end. Actually, let me just have this end here too. It's useful. All right, so big picture view, what's happened here is that in general, these footage clips that we edited are loosely aligned with the compositions now. The difference is that this one is actually including these three clips, but we've made our compositions kind of match that editing rhythm. So even if you didn't understand how that works, I'm going to add this back to a single timeline. Even if you didn't understand, what you should see as you scan through this is that everything should look just right. All right, good. Okay. One thing I want to do, if you've edited these videos, you know that it's the job of the person who does prepping to figure out this end point. We need to figure out when we're going to end this video. She's waving here, and she's done waving. It's awkward to keep it on for that long. In fact, the whole act of waving is a little bit awkward in a way. So what I'll do is I'll figure out how long she's talking, and I'm going to hold down Command and scrub. All right, so she says bye. I think right as she closes her eyes there, I don't want to see too far past that. So this marketing frame is what we want to be adjusting. This is on the very top. It's going to cover up everything. We want to know when are we going to have this cover up her. So we can bring this over. And let's zoom in so we can see what's going on here. Inside here are some keyframes. And this is controlling an animation, which brings this marketing frame down. So I mentioned that this is the part where I kind of don't want to see past that. I like to get it so that the animation is happening. It begins to cover up her face right about this time. All right, now I can kind of scan through here. Okay. You don't want to cut it too close so that she is speaking and suddenly it cuts out. You want to have there a little bit of space between the last thing she said and her getting, the curtain. But that's going to work out pretty well. So at this point, you only have one more thing to do. That's the bulk of the prepping step. First thing I should do, and this is a bad example on my part, you need to really save this as soon as you start because there's a problem. You're going to lose all the work you do, so the faster you save, the better. I'm going to name this 24. Don't ever overwrite anything because this is the finished lesson 23. And if you overwrite one of those, then it's just gone. So I'm going to make this 24. That should be the only one of its type in this project. Let's save. Okay, the last thing that needs to happen, we mentioned that there are 3 shots that happen in here. C, D, and E. But that's going to look kind of bad, right? You think about it, like we have these 3 wide shots. We're just going to go from one, cut to another shot completely. That's going to happen twice over the course of this shot. So we're always going to have her on camera how to avoid that looking bad. And there's no great way. Like this is In some ways, a weakness of the series is that we have to do this. Preferably, they would be able to deliver just an hour long, sorry, a minute long of just talking. But in practice, it's too difficult to get them to do that in one take. So we compromise by having it split into 3. What we're going to do here is we're going to add kind of a crossfade between these shots. So what I'm going to do is open up the transparency, opacity controls for these layers, and I'm going to do that by selecting them all and hitting T. That's the keyframe for opacity. It's not O, it's T. I'm going to zoom in. We're going to want to work on a pretty minute level here. And then there's a formula for this that I usually follow. I'm going to check my documents for what that is. So what we see here, this is just over the course of trial and error, I've kind of discovered this. Each of these has a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frame transition, and there's 1 frame between the areas where they're both at 100%. Okay, if this is your first time doing keyframes in After Effects, I need to go over that just a little bit, but I won't go into too much detail. So this is the edit. And normally what we can do is do an animation just by changing the values from time to time. So if we go back 5 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we say we want this one to be completely opaque, not transparent at all, then we're going to set a keyframe here, right here. So it's at 100%. And then we want this to animate. And so we're going to go over here and we're going to make it 0. And what that does is now the computer interpolates and it figures out, all right, so it needs to transition in this way until it's out. In the same way, we want this layer to go from 0 to 100%. So I'm going to go forward 5 frames, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, make a keyframe, go back out here. This time it needs to be 0. So what we have right here is fade out, fade in. Okay, the timing of this is fine, but the different problem is that we want it to be a crossfade instead of a fade out, fade in. So I'll just extend these a little bit. And I'm just going to move this back here. Now let's just test this out. All right, so you see what's happened here. Now we are fading this in about the same time as we're fading that one out, and it makes it more of a crossfade. But we still don't want any of this kind of transparent area. That's why we also move this one over like that. What we have now is that here, this shot is completely opaque 100%. Here, this one is completely opaque at 100%. At no point do you have that kind of dip that comes from the crossfade. If it were like this, you get that kind of dip. Okay, so that's the timing that we want. And this is a really good chance because if you have any problem with alignment, it's really going to show forth here. And this is the chance you have to refine here. So usually what I'll do is I'll look at just the body in general, and the eyes are the second most important thing. So here, I'm seeing her necklace is amazingly right in the exact same place. But as I look from here to here, part of it is that she's kind of leaned back. This is an art form. It's not a technical thing. You need to come up with a way to make this as seamless as possible. And sometimes that causes you to do some unconventional techniques, and sometimes it's very easy. So as I'm going to move this bottom layer, I'm just going to try to find out an area that looks better for the transition. More pixels in common, so to speak. All right. And that looks pretty good. Her face is staying in generally the same place. You know, her body's just in a different posture, so that's part of that's unavoidable. So that looks okay to me. What you don't want is it to be just way off, you know. Like that's going to call a lot of attention to it because she's going to seem to shift from left to right. You want people to be able to blink and really miss this. Okay, but there are 2 of these. So we're going to go over here now. Zooming in again. And I'm just going to do this the same way because that actually works pretty nicely. So page up 2, 3, 4, 5. Set a keyframe out here. Set the keyframe to 0. And then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Keyframe. Come back here. Set it to 0. And we've got that fade out, fade in. Okay. I'll move these so that the layer's visibility isn't going to cause any problems. Move this back here, this back here, and test it out. All right, so I'm seeing a very strong shift to the right. Let's fix that. I'm going to move the bottom layer. You don't want to move the top layer. Think about this because you've already adjusted this to look nice with C. So you want to adjust E to match D. All right, I think we can come up with a really nice one. Her body is in a relatively similar pose. So let's watch this. Oh yeah, that's a really nice one. So if you're watching this, I really think it's even hard to notice unless you're a video editor, just like what's going on here. So that's an example of a really good one, and part of that is just because the host was in the right position. And sometimes you won't have an easy job like that, but that's kind of an example of how it could go. And at this point, you are done prepping. Okay, thank you. That's all there is. From this point, the motion graphics person can take it, and they'll add the title, they'll add all the subtitles and these graphics and words, and we'll have a pretty much finished video. Okay, so save your work, and you're done.